What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today's digital delivery prepped for deconstruction is the high-flying NBA Street NBA Jam love child known as NBA Playgrounds by Saber Interactive and published by Mad Dog Games. NBA Playgrounds is out May 9th for PC, Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One for a suggested retail price of $19.99. So let's sit back and see if NBA Playgrounds is indeed on fire, returning to the passion presented in the original title with its over-the-top announcers, giant heads, and John Carter of Mars physics engines, or does it go the way of Slam City with Scottie Pippen on the Sega CD, a game so terrible that rumor is Scottie himself reimbursed friends who bought it because that's what real men do. They pay off complaints with money. As always, if you like the review, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for NBA Playgrounds, Steve Colbert's run as a hidden NBA player, shocking your balls, and Garrett from the Thief series in baller form. Graphics are up first. I know this particular section is probably going to be a little bit contentious because many folks found the NBA Street titles a little bit more to their liking with the glitz and glamour and b-ball style versus the far more cartoony and frankly at times scary as hell Jam titles with their hidden Clinton characters sporting digitalized demon faces that probably single-handedly ended the scan face, plop it into the game, and call it good game development craze. Now, graphically, Playground skews far closer to Jam and honestly doesn't look half bad with a heavy on the color use and effects kind of style, going away completely from anything that resembles real life to the point where players are pretty much caricatures of caricatures. Now, stylistically, in many ways, this actually reminds me a little bit of Avatar-based games on the Xbox 360, only a couple of detail levels above that. And to be honest, I think of all the things going for this game, that itself is one of them, and I actually really like the overall look despite a couple issues I'll get to in a second. In its presentation, it's clean, goofy, and pretty much knows what it wants to present at any one time. Now, the various locations are all represented well with the pop and bling of Las Vegas with mysteriously familiar looking faces in courtside crowds to folks practicing Tai Chi courtside in Chinese arenas. It won't win any awards, but it all fits well stylistically. Now, I spent most of my time on the PC, and it's rock solid when it comes to performance, even on the low-end testing laptop with an i5 and an 870M, and I think that makes sense because no matter what's happening on the screen, it's not nearly as intensive as most FPSs from maybe even 5 years ago. It's just not that style of game. While the console performance runs the gamut from good to just okay, with the Xbox One and PS4 almost identical, but the Switch seems to be missing some effects and just looks odd compared to the other versions, with a somewhat noticeable difference in the lighting detail all around, and unfortunately a lower than 720p resolution when not docked. Luckily, they all aim for 60 frames per second, and most of them hit it at all times. Now, when it comes to the characters themselves, personally, I loved it, and most players do look a little bit like their real-life counterparts, albeit blown out into renditions that look like they jumped out of that Land of Confusion music video by the band Phil Collins and those other dudes you never cared about. I also have to say I like the overall look when it came to the camera angles zooming in on various alley-oops and slams, and that added this dynamic feel to the game. You know, I've always felt that the NBA over-the-top titles like this have a chance of becoming distracting in their blitz to blast you with glitter and fiery balls like a red light district just exploded, and admittedly, that does happen sometimes here, especially in particular courts where, just due to the heavy color use, it can get a little bit distracting. All that being said, splitting the defense with a crossover dribble move and then leaping up into the air, doing a full somersault, landing on the basket, and then Greg Louganising it for a slam is awesome, no matter how many times you're going to see it. I'd say as a package, Playgrounds fits pretty nicely into somewhat of its own look. It's a more stylized Jam from previous years taken to the future where someone discovered Technicolor and then turned it up a few hundred bars in the saturation options. Unfortunately, the Switch version does have some issues though. Sound, music, and voice.
That shot was ill-advised.
A three? Yes!
Brutal! Ooh, that's gonna leave a mark.
And of course, when it comes to the categories for audio, sound is up first, and this is actually pretty good. It's got all the sneaker squeaking, hoop slicing sounds you'd expect, and when all four players are fighting for a rebound, leaping almost out of the screen, audio does well to give you little informational cues if you lose your player for a moment, which I think is bound to happen. Now, when the game really gets going with shots tallying up 5 or more points, it can get a bit over the top, but overall, it's all very well done with a bit of processing for echo and reverb to give the court a more open-ended tone when you're playing outside in the open air of a casino's rooftop court. And of course that brings us to music. Now luckily the music here within most of the courts is fine, with accordions and more modern instruments playing along in Paris, to fairly standard sub-heavy electronic when down to the last moments in Vegas, to even more expected fare in some of the other stages. It's not great, and it sort of just barely touches on the familiar chords and instruments you would expect or at least assume would be played in those locations. If there's one real kudo I have to say about the soundtrack though, is that it's layered just about perfectly and it's created just about perfectly to fill the expected silence of just the game occurring and not have you really reaching for the game's options to turn it up or down. Now that being said, the vocal track that plays while you're unwrapping your card decks, which represent your players, sounds like someone is trying to channel 1990s rap after they bought their first vocoder. It is catchy, I give them that, but my god, after one or two times it was time to turn that off. As a complete package, it's not bad for a game priced at this level, and it has enough variation I think most folks are going to be happy with it. Voice. You know, while I think the voice actors did completely fine, the fact is they have absolutely no real energy. Remember that time you said I love you and the other person waited just a bit too long and it spawned one of those discussions? Yeah, pretty much the same thing here, because for reasons that absolutely boggle my mind, many of the things they say are many seconds delayed, and this was tested on two different versions. Sometimes you'll be getting ready to throw the ball out, and the announcer is still saying, "Let's see if the shot is good." It is. The audio engine also consistently cuts off voices when you do something that might be surprising, but then doesn't say anything about your action. So sometimes you shove a character while the announcers are talking about your handling skills, and they stop mid-sentence, but no audio pops in to discuss what just occurred. It's like the first time they've seen someone get shoved in a basketball court and they're too busy waving handkerchiefs in their faces so they don't faint to say anything. It doesn't always happen, but it does happen enough to notice. Overall, I'd say while the announcers were fine and it didn't fill the game with unneeded banter, the writing could have been better and the engine itself has a problem with some of its timing. Gameplay. So it's fairly simple stuff. 2-on-2 basketball with big-headed freaks, slamming, sprinting, jamming, slipping, and sliding past one another into open lanes to see who can come out on top in the end. Now you start with an exhibition mode with online not an option until you play through the first tournament to sort of settle you into the game. Gameplay is somewhat geared towards speed gaming. You can jump, shoot, throw elbows, steal, shove, alley-oop, dunk, and a couple more things. Now, when shooting, it's pretty much like any sports game where you're kicking, punting, or so on, where you have this lovely little button-hold event and need to let go of it at the right time to make the shot, and that includes dunks. And you hit the perfect shot and you might get another point added, meaning both actual distance for a three-pointer as well as your finesse may actually pay off, resulting in higher scoring shots. Where Playgrounds revels is within the combination of all those things, which I'll get to in a bit. So as you score points, you have a meter that raises, which allows for you to get a special temporary lottery bonus that's picked from those bonuses you've unlocked, like 2 times the amount of points if you shoot a ball from a specific area on the court, or my favorite, a shorter shot clock for your opponent. While not overpowering, these can actually be surprisingly useful. For example, the shot clock can dramatically affect the endgame, as one person may technically be able to hold onto the ball until the time runs out, while if it was the other team, they have to take a forced shot or get dinged with a violation. And honestly, that works out really well and added a feeling of strategy that I enjoyed without basically trying to turn a donut into a cake and making it too complex. As always, in these titles, knowing and understanding where you are is important, but more importantly here is knowing where the enemy is, and here's why. Because this might as well be called friggin' Thief 5, because holy crap, stealing is overpowered. If you're not stealing, you're preparing to steal, and if you're not preparing to steal, you're being stolen from by the player that you stole the stolen ball from, who in turn got it stolen and then stole it back right before you stole it. To say it's overpowered is like saying an atomic bomb is good for removing tree stumps in your backyard. It's right, and it's hilarious, but it's overpowered. And not in a way that gives any side a particular advantage. It's that the move itself is just overall unbalanced, and not in a way that gives any side a particular advantage over almost everything else, making the game feel less like basketball sometimes and more like a bunch of middle schoolers trying to cop a feel at their first dance. Now shoving, another move, is also a bit unbalanced. Sure, it carries the negative of using up your special bar for the lotteries, but it is so powerful that I went from having some good, somewhat close games with the AI to absolutely smoking the opponents in all of the tournaments by simply waiting back the moment the ball was tossed, either pushing or prompting the AI to push at that point. And they could do the same. I mean, that's what's funny. Who doesn't like a little tackle football in their basketball? But that coupled with the goddamn windmill disaster that I'm going to discuss in a second, known as elbowing, and you have a game that feels strangely disconnected from the speed, pomp, and circumstance of its predecessors. And that's saying a lot, because this is a game with giant lop-headed characters that can leap 20 feet in the air. So noticing this issue means it's pretty profound. But at least the nice thing is that shoving and in many ways stealing both have something that you can defend it with. If you're trick dribbling by moving the right thumb pad in a direction and not just running forward, the chances of those moves working is a little bit less, and that can leave the lane open or some pretty profound and flashy dunks. Now, elbowing is no holds barred though, and suddenly it becomes a toss elbow, make shot game, meaning if you don't have players with a good block skill that can sit out of the way of the Wolverine bent arm attack that's going to happen, you could find yourself actually getting smoked. But the nice thing is, despite a lot of those things, it's still really enjoyable when just sitting back playing and following the unwritten rule that you won't send someone's gold tooth with their initials through the back of their brain pan. The game can actually be great fun, and it helps that, for the most part, the control just works, even if at first it might feel a little disjointed just due to how different moves are so powerful. And the more you play, the more experience you get, and the more card packs you unlock for players with no microtransactions at all. This results in a good substantial library of giant-headed freaks being built by even the most casual of players, and repeated cards draws you a little bit of extra experience. Of course, all the players have various stats, like of course dunk and shots like 2-pointers and 3-pointers. Player rarity goes from normal to legendary, most of which have special moves, and the more you play with them, the more you can unlock things like special dunks, alley-oops, and so forth. But I gotta say, it's damn refreshing to just play and unlock items without the tab for a store appearing in the menu, like the developer's a crying baby begging for money tit. Sadly, not all is right here in the gameplay section. Let's talk a little bit about multiplayer and online, or the lack of any online at all until after launch for the Switch. First, when it comes to couch co-op, it's 4-player, which is great stuff, but online, sadly, it's just borked. First, it's 1-on-1 online, not 2-on-2, leaving the AI fill in the slots. You also can't do tournaments right now online, nor can you, wait for it, join friends. That's right, it's a completely random join, and while I love the option, the fact that these series of games are downright synonymous with badmouthing friends as your Clyde Drexler touches the sky over the head of someone else's gatemouth Larry Bird, its exclusion is shocking, despite the promise that at some point it may be added. Again, the Switch doesn't even have online play right now, so hey, who knows. Also, the game has a bevy of bugs, from basketballs freezing to the center of the court like a frozen booger on a picnic table, to the aforementioned voice sample cutoffs, to far more egregious oddities, like when you lose and hit replay to restart the match, the game doesn't just instantly restart, it reloads everything all over again, resulting in a great deal of wasted time. Altogether, I'd say there is actually a ton to like here, but there are some missteps that really impact it. Fun factor. Yeah, it is fun. It may sound like I don't think it is, but I enjoyed a great deal of what NBA Playgrounds offered, and when it's at its best, it's moments of sheer institutional speed and glory as your baller somersaults through the air above the heads of your enemies. It's just that it feels decidedly not ready for prime time in all ways. It's like a college star leaving school early for the draft. You can't all be stars. Some of you are scrubs whose game was elevated by the lack of competition or suspect circumstances and the fact that your friends told you were ready when you weren't. While co-op is a blast, online can be fun also, but if it's not cut in half in number, it's lacking in different options, resulting in some good core gameplay that falls apart the moment you wanted to add any freshness to it. And any promises of future adds of expected options always rings hollow to me, because it's sort of a reverse friggin' loan. You're not borrowing to get more and paying monthly payments, you're paying up front for less and hoping the other person makes their monthly patches, and I do not like that. So as always, you guys know I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale, with of course deep sale replacing rent on PC titles. This is a wait for a sale. At this price, you can't expect everything, and I can forgive a couple issues here and there, but the lack of a lot of the different tournaments and online for the Switch and all of these issues just really makes me question, if somebody can't deliver upfront at first, there isn't a lot of reason for me to hope that they'll deliver later. So as always, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your week.